Now let's look at the adverbial phrase. The adverbial phrase. The adverbial phrase. Meanwhile, don't forget, we are still going to bring our past question later in our subsequent video and answer them based on all of the aspects under comprehension and summary reading. So let's look at adverbial phrase. Adverbial phrase. You see, the knowledge of our part of speech is very important. I keep telling students that part of speech is very important. It's a solid foundation of English. So your knowledge from adverb, don't forget adverbs as is standing as a part of speech under the 8th part of speech in English, just like noun too. So adverbial phrase too. How do you know an adverbial phrase? That is, you know, I've told us after you've discovered that that expression is a phrase, then you need to tell the type of phrase that it is for you to name your grammatical name. So an adverbial phrase, a phrase that has an element of an adverb. That is, you can see an adverb modifying a verb. That is, you will discover that in the expression there will be an adverb that is modifying. Let's see for example. Examples. Adverbial phrase as adverb modifying a verb, adjective, or another adverb. So that's how for you to discover it. Now the function is that the function. What is the function? You know, don't forget in noun we have two functions. In noun phrase we have two functions. It starts as the subject of the verb, then it starts as the what? The complement of the verb, depending on the position the expression is occupying in the sentence. So for function of an adverbial phrase, we have it as it modifies the what? The verb. That is the verb that precedes or comes before it. It modifies it. Now let's look at examples. Examples. 1. In the afternoon, the students will be available. Let's say the expression in the passage is about an education or about the class settings. Now you have this expression: in the afternoon the students will be available, and this is where they underline in the afternoon. This is an adverbial phrase. Why? Because it's showing a time. Basically we have what we call the element of an adverb. Afternoon is an adverb. Adverb of what? Of time. So you need to discover the element you have in the what? In the underlined expression for you to be able to name your grammatical name vividly. So if I've given this expression now, what will I do? I will discover that I have an element of an adverb, which is what? Afternoon. So this grammatical name or this type of phrase is what? Is an adverbial phrase. So this is the whole sentence. In the afternoon, the student will be available. So you name your grammatical name as what? Adverbial phrase. That's Roman figure 1. Then Roman figure 2. What's the function? It modify the what? The verb. What is the verb that is modifying here? We have two verbs here. Will be. But the main verb is what? Will. It modifies the verb. You got it. Will. You have answered your grammatical name and function. And in WAEC, I think we have like 3 marks for grammatical name and function under your comprehension as a whole. So that is that about what? About phrase and its types. Now let's move to clause. I've told us that under the grammatical name and function, the 2 things that we need to know very well for us to name our grammatical expression is the what? The phrase and what? And clause. Now let's look at clause. Alright, I have it here already. Clause. Now what is a clause? Is, you see, phrase and clause, they are just like twin brothers. That is, what happened to phrase doesn't happen to clause. Now, what is a clause? You remember we said phrase works without a finite verb. But in the case of clause, we have a finite verb. So what is this implying to say? That is, in the expression, when you have a finite verb there, that is a what? Is a clause. Now let's talk about clause. Is a group of words with finite verb. Don't forget, we said finite verb, they are verbs that shows for tense or number agreement. That is, from your expression that has been on the line, when you have a verb there, and if the verb is a finite verb, definitely it is a what? It is a clause. Now let's look at the types of clause. Basically, we have two types of clause. Types of clause. We have what we call main clause, and we have what we call subordinate clause. But for the function, or for the case of grammatical name and function, we are not really concerned with the main clause. We are concerned with what? The subordinate clause, because it is in the subordinate clause that the expression will be underlined from in the passage, in which you are to do what? To provide the grammatical name for it, the type of clause it is. So don't forget, I told us that clause actually have a word, a finite verb. It has a word, a finite verb. And in the type of clause, the main clause, they are the independent clause. That is, they are clause that can stand on their own. For instance, let's look at examples of main clause. Examples of main clause. Here we have everybody is here. If you look at this expression now, it is a main clause because it can stand on its own without the addition of any what we call subordinate clause with it. It can stand. Everybody is here. And why do we say this is a clause? Because of this verb. This is a finite verb. It shows number agreements. There's an agreement between every and the verb is. So that is why we don't really have concern with main clause. Why? Because main clause, they can stand on their own. They are not having problems. So the subordinate clause is what we actually want to look onto. Subordinate clause, they are clause that cannot stand on their own to give a common sense or a complete expression. They cannot. So the subordinate clause, they always depend on the main clause. Like what I have here now, everybody is here. I can provide a subordinate clause to it. Everybody is here, so that they can be attended to, or they can be attended to, depending on the expression. So you can have a subordinate clause to join this main clause. This example of a main clause. Now let's look at examples of subordinate clause, because that is our major focus. Examples of subordinate clause before we look at the types. Number one I have here is one, which went along with hilarious drumming. This example is from WAEC 2018. WAEC 2018. And the expression was underlined from the passage. Although this is not the whole sentence. You know, I told us that you need to go back to the passage to discover the whole sentence for you to be able to name, that is important for your function, so that you can know the function it is performing. And if you look at it, like I told us earlier, that clause is a group of words with finite verb. Now, the expression here, let's look at it. What is the finite verb for you to be able to say this is a clause? Went is the finite verb. That is, this is the past form of go. Don't forget, went. So that is what we are saying. In your expression, you need to discover if there is a use of a verb there. If there is a use of a verb there, if the verb is finite verb. If it is a finite verb, that expression is a clause. If there is no use of a verb or a finite verb, that expression is a what? Is a phrase. So now let's look at the types of subordinate clause. Types of subordinate clause. Types of subordinate clause. Don't forget, the same way we have three types in the noun, in the phrase, we also have three types of what? Of subordinate clause. Number one, you have noun clause, noun clause. 2, we have relative or adjectival. We can call it an adjectival clause. Then lastly, just like we have in noun, in phrase, adverbial clause. Now we are going to look at all of this type of clause one after the other. I'm going to look at them and give examples on them, and as well as their functions, Now let's look at noun clause first. Noun clause. Like I said earlier on, that is when you have an element of noun in the expression serving as the head word, then that expression is a noun clause or a noun phrase, depending on what you discover the expression to be, either a clause or phrase. So let's look at examples under the noun clause. Examples. 1. I discovered that I mistook to give this example the other time under phrase, care of myself. This example is coming from WAEC 2019 passage. The passage for the 2019 WAEC, you can get to check it, and this is where the underlined expression begins from. That I could take care of myself. Now this is the whole sentence. I discovered that I could take care of myself, but the expression I was underlined for that sentence is what? I could take care of myself. I've told you need to discover the whole sentence. Now if you look at this expression now, is it a phrase or a clause? It's a clause. Why? There's a use of a finite verb, could, which is a tense form. It's a tense form of verb. So that is what you need to know first. That is, you need to know if there is a use of a finite verb. And if there's a use of a finite verb, you should know that it's a clause. Then what type of clause is this? This is a noun clause. Why? Because it is occupying the subject position. The complement position. It is in the complement position because in the whole sentence, our subject is what? I. Then the verb is what? Discovered. Then this is our complement. That I could take care of myself is a complement. That is, for you to know if the expression is a noun phrase or noun clause, you need to look at the position of the expression in the sentence. Is it in the position of what? Of a subject or a what? Complement. And another thing, is there a use of a pronoun or a use of a noun? If you look at what we have here, we have the use of a noun, a pronoun, myself, and we have the use of pronoun that. So you look at the elements that are used in the expression. If you have a noun or pronoun element, that shows that it is a noun clause. Now the function. Now if you want to report this now, don't forget the same function we have for the noun phrase is also the same function we have for the clause. Now is noun, regardless of either be it a clause or a phrase. So the same function. Number 1, I said it serves as the word subject of the verb. Number 2, it serves as the word complement of the verb. And this expression now, we're having it at the complement level. So our function will be what? Complement of the verb discovered. Now let's report it. So if you are in that exam, what you do is that to name the grammatical name of function, you just say Roman figure 1, noun clause. Then Roman figure 2, it says as the complement or object. Sometimes you can refer complement as object. Complement of the verb. What verb? Discovered. You quote it. Discovered. You have gotten your trademark already under grammatical name or function. Yeah. So noun clause we have or will be positioned at either in the subject level or the complement level. Now let's look at relative clause. That's the second type of subordinate clause. relative clocks. Don't forget, relative clocks, they make use of relative pronoun. That is, for you to know or for you to discover that an expression is a relative clause, there will be a use of relative pronouns. There will be a use of relative clause makes use of relative pronouns. And what are the relative pronouns we are talking about? E.g., who, whom, which, whose, and that. These are examples of relative pronoun. Who, whom, which, whose, and that. And if you look at them, for us to discover that they are relative pronouns, they normally qualify nouns. That is, they will give you more information about the noun that precedes them, that comes before them. They give you the what? The quality of the noun that comes before them. For instance, let's look at examples. Examples. Number one. Everybody. I'm trying to extract all the whole sentence from the passage. I got all of these examples from. Everybody was impressed with the feats, let's see, the feats which went along with hilarious drumming. I've used this example earlier on in my example of clause too. So the underlying expression is from which went along with hilarious drumming. You look at it, there is a use of what? Relative pronoun, which. And another thing is that relative clause, they normally qualify noun that comes before them. That is, they will tell you more information about the nouns. Now, the expression is everybody was impressed with the feast. Which feast? The one that went along with hilarious drumming. Which went along. If you look at this expression, is qualifying this noun. That is giving us more information about the feast. You understand me? So the function of, don't forget, the function of relative clause is actually, let me put it here, function. Under relative clause, it qualifies the noun. It normally qualifies the noun. So after so in each of this type of clause or phrase, you need to know their functions. So it's not by hand. In fact, if you name your grammatical name correctly and you could not report the function correctly, you might lose the whole mark, because the function shows that you actually know the grammatical name. So you cannot bring a function of another grammatical name and believe that you can score your grammatical name and score your function and miss your function. No, you will miss everything. So you need to report your grammatical name, and the function must be in line with the grammatical name that you've named your expression to be. So if you want to report this now, Roman figure 1, it is a relative clause. Don't forget, why is it a clause? There's a use of finite verb went. Then 2, it qualifies. That's the function. It qualifies the what? The noun. What's the noun qualifying? Fits. So that is that about what? Relative clause. Now let's look at adverbial clause. The last type of clause. The last type of subordinate clause. Finally, the third type of clause, which is the adverbial clause. The adverbial clause. Adverbial clause is what we are left to discuss on. So the adverbial clause, just like the other type of clause, the noun clause, the relative clause, they are clauses that have the element of adverb in the expression. That is, when you discover that you have an element of adverb, a marker of adverb in the expression, then you should know that that is an adverbial clause. And when you discover that the clause modifies the verb that is being described in the whole sentence, then that is what? That is an adverbial clause. Now let's look at some of the adverbial clause that we have here. Some of the adverbial clause that we have here, and be able to discuss them. Number one example. Examples. Adverbial clause and examples. One. As he dragged it to the surface, we screamed in terror. Now this example is extracted from the WAEC 2017. That was where this example is was brought from. So we look at it now. This is the expression that is on the line. Let's look at it. As he dragged it to the surface. As he dragged it to the surface. That is, as this drag is performed on a surface, that is an adverbial adverb of place, that is on a surface, on a particular location. So as he dragged it to the surface, we look at an element of an adverb as, then suffix is an element of adverb. So you should be able to discover that this is an adverbial clause. And remember, the verb that we have in this expression, which is dragged, it's a finite verb, the past form of a verb. So that is why this is what an adverbial phrase. Adverbial clause, adverbial clause, because of the finite verb. Then the function is that it modifies the verb. What is the verb? The verb screamed. You caught it. I've always said that. Screamed. So for you to be able to know an adverbial clause, that is, you need to have an element of an adverb, and the sentence will showcase a performance of an adverb in the expression. So that is that about adverb, and that is that about grammatical name and functions. So I told us that we need to discover which of it is the expression coming from. Is it phrase or clause? Now let's look at some general questions from other years in the WAEC past questions. I've extracted some expressions in which I would love us to do to perform a practice on them together. Number one here. Okay, let me have the whole thing going on. So we are going to discuss and look for the grammatical name and function for these expressions together. Number one, I realized that my role was crucial. This expression is from WAEC 2013. That's number one. Number two, grammatical name function. Number two, we have as soon as the sheet chart ended, they announced that Ireti is here. Now this expression is from WAEC 2012. Now let's look at these two expressions first before we go for the other ones. I realize now this is the expression on the line. Then here we have as soon as the sheet chart ended. Now let's look at this expression. I've told us that we look at our expression and discover if it is a phrase or a clause. Now, how do we do that? We look for the verb. Is there a verb there? Yes, we have a verb here, which is works. And this verb is a finite verb. Why? Because it's showing a tense structure of its present form, which is x. Now, this expression is a clause. Why? Because of the finite verb. Now, we look at it. What type of clause is it? What type of clause is it? Now, the position of this expression is in the complement level. So, if you look at the old sentence, hi is the subject, realize is the verb. This is the what? The complement. So, this expression is a noun clause. It is a what? A noun clause. Noun clause. Because we have the element of noun, which is crucial, and as well as the position of the statement is in the complement level. So the function is what? It serves as the complement of the verb. What verb? Realized. So grammatical name and function is not something that is so difficult to answer on. I can even answer a question on grammatical name and function even without reading a passage. Why? Because you look for the expression and discover if it is a phrase or a clause. Then you discover what type of phrase or clause it is. Now, number 2, as soon as the sheet started ended. Now, the question is this a clause or a phrase? Is it a clause or a phrase? It is a clause. Why? There is a finite verb here, which is what? Ended, a past form of end. So, and for you to know the type of clause it is, you see an element of time. As soon as the sheet started ended, that is an adverb of time. You understand me? As soon, that is as soon after, that is time. So the grammatical name is what? Adverbial clause. And the function will be what? Modifying what? Don't forget the function of an adverbial clause or phrase is that it modifies a verb. And what verb is it modifying? A noun. It modifies the verb announced. So you discover that you've answered your question on grammatical name and function. So that is that about grammatical name and function. So in our other videos that we dropped, we still have 2 items left under comprehension and summary, and which they are the figures of speech and word substitution. Because in the passage, certain expression will be underlined the same way we have in grammatical name and function, and you will be asked what is the figures of speech used in the expression. Then other aspect, which is the word substitution, some certain words will be underlined, about 6 or 7, and you will be asked other words that can replace them as used in the passage. So look forward for our next video to discuss these leftover items. Do well to subscribe on the channel, like, and expect more of our videos on YouTube.